risk are you identifying related to third-party risk management?
What I have seen is auditors aren't really doing as much as I'd like to see them do in terms of progress in looking at third-party risk. So I'd like to see them doing more. Some of the bigger risk areas that have come up in the last recent years have been particularly related to technology areas, cloud computing, cybersecurity. Some of those areas are areas that companies have specifically gone out and outsourced.
We're now even seeing strategic risks, so third parties are doing things that are directly opposite of what the company would want to have seen done, and that's another risk. Obviously cybersecurity, data privacy risks, and also the public relations risk that will occur if something does go awry with your third party.
Right. And I'd agree, Nancy. I think one of the things we're seeing within our client base is how are companies taking those risks and then aligning them to where they reside with what third party. So if you think about it as you're outsourcing different activities, you're going to the professional for a certain task. What risks are associated with that, and how do you align those so as you do your activities to be sure you're addressing the right risk with the right third party?
How is third-party risk management prioritized in your organization, and has that changed based on key events in the news regarding issues with other leading companies?
They haven't really done a good job at necessarily identifying who their vendors are, having risk management process put in place, similar to what Mike's firm works on in terms of coming up with a solid process that a company can use to look at who their vendors are, what their risks are, what the major functions are that are performed by vendors. So I think there's a lot of work that companies can do to expand their evaluation of risk management practices and looking at third-party risk.
And I think it starts with the risk management, looking at the different third parties that you use, identifying the risks in whatever they're doing. So for example, are those third parties in countries, operating in countries where risks are higher? Is the potential for bribery and corruption at a high level? Are they using data that would be private, or is it healthcare data? All those things. So it starts with risk assessment in compiling a database of all these third parties and assessing the risk to each one of them, whether it be high, medium, or low, and then driving your program from there, from that initial risk management or risk assessment.
I think the other point that I would add to that is, if you look at your third party base, what third parties are those third parties using? So a lot of times what we see within our client base, people miss is they do a real good job of identifying all their third parties, but then they don't think about that next layer down. And that next layer down still can impact the risk profile of your organization.
So how are you involved in addressing risk around third-party risk management?
I think this is an area where internal audit really can add value. So we can't audit every third party, but we can ensure that there's a right to audit clause and that it's utilized in all the different agreements. But the one thing we can do, so if we look at the first line of defense, we can help them write audit programs so that they can go out and audit the vendors, because the vendors they're specifically working with. So that's an area that internal audit can add value. The other area where we can add value, a lot of times work with third parties, the whole entire program may be in the compliance area, right? So internal audit, under our standards, we're obligated to assess the effectiveness of our compliance program. And if we are looking at the compliance program and how well third parties are included, monitored for compliance on an ongoing basis, that's another area where we can add value.
When we go to our client base is just an overall third-party governance process. And we've seen companies and organizations struggle on how do we format or formulate this process to where both it's efficient within our organization, effective within our organization. So as we go out and do some of these on-site, we're not a adversary coming in with our client, our third-party base, but we're working together with our third parties, where we've actually seen that strengthen the relationship.
In the combined assurance, in terms of looking at what these other groups are doing within your own organization, you can also rely some on the internal auditors of the company that might be the outsourcer and evaluate that.
And I think that's, Mark, I'd agree, and I think that's where the governance structure becomes critical, because that sets the playbook for the organization.